Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you like this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. We greatly appreciate it. We have Travis French here on the show with us. He's a traveling musician turned Christian family man. He's coming to us all the way from Pontiac, Illinois. Travis, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, dude. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory and what inspired you to get into music?
Man, I would say a lot of that is just like the generational thing. My grandpa plays guitar and sings. My great grandma, my great great grandma were both musicians. Like my great grandma, she played piano. My great great grandmother played guitar and piano and helped lead worship. My dad is an amazing musician. Seriously, very talented. He could sing like Journey songs, full voice, no problem. The 80s guy,
Yep.
like just really good at music. So I was always influenced by that growing up. That was a huge thing for me. I ever since I can remember sitting on my dad's lap or being in the family gatherings, like family get-togethers, like there would be 3 or 4 people playing guitars. Like my uncle plays, my cousins play. It's a family thing, and it was just always there. And I mean, I'm sure that had some sort of influence on me when I was a little kid. You know,
Absolutely. Was there a specific song or a specific album or specific artist that you remember that really gave you that drive to push to become a musician, or was it just accumulation of a lot of things?
I'd say it was more of an accumulation of a lot of things. I'd say honestly, more than like an artist or an album or anything like that. My dad,
Hmm.
like he's an amazing songwriter. He was an amazing musician, and he led worship like my whole life.
Hmm.
So I was always influenced by my father. Like my father Jay, super good musician, and he just was always playing. Like we were at home, I'd sitting on his lap, and he'd be helping me like pluck his strings, and that's what did it for me, really.
That
I wanted to be like dad growing up.
That's so awesome. Like I mean, there's so many times where we hear some of these musician stories and it's not really family based. It's a lot because they had like, bad childhoods or they had troubled things. So it's really nice to hear that people had, good inspiration from their parents. I mean, that's really great. So when you got started in music, what would you say is the hardest thing that you had to pick up on when it came to becoming a musician? What was the hardest thing for you to learn?
Um, Man, I honestly, I don't know, because you said like the troubled childhood
Hmm.
and stuff. That's one of the things that was also a huge influencer for me, because I did have a troubled childhood.
Oh, okay.
I actually didn't live with my dad from
Oh.
5 till 13. So when I was growing up as a kid, I was pretty poor.
Hmm.
Like by American standards, I was really poor. Lived in a trailer park, and just went through a lot of trials with my family there. My mom was just really just in her own personal struggle, and I had an abusive stepfather, and I got picked on a lot at school when I was in 6th grade, and I got picked on for being poor, and it just made me really depressed, and I was just just being brutally honest, but I was crying myself to sleep every night when I was 11. And my dad ended up buying me a guitar when I went back on break, and he was trying to teach me some guitar a little bit, but he was kind of just being like gentle and patient and
Hmm.
would like kind of intro me into it. But I went back to Texas to that trailer park, and I brought my guitar with me, and then I ended up taking like 1 or 2 lessons with this guy up at the church, because there's a church right next door to the park, so I was always there. And the lessons didn't continue, but I ended up like falling asleep with my guitar every night in bed, and like just snuggling up with it, man. Like
Yeah.
instead of crying myself to sleep, I was playing myself to sleep.
Mhm.
And I remember writing music like on the guitar in like my first week of playing, like
Wow.
just kind of improvising with chords that I'd already learned. And I feel like that's really what I didn't have like a struggle, because I was so thirsty for something to give me life, and like I feel like guitar, and like God gave me guitar, and guitar just really, through God, like
Mhm.
that breathed into me, man, at a young age, and it changed everything for me.
Absolutely.
So
Do you remember what the first song was that you learned to play on guitar?
yeah, Every Rose Has Its Thorns by
Nice.
by Poison, or was it Guns N' Roses? I can't remember.
Poison,
It was
yeah. Yeah.
Poison, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
one.
it was easy. It was
Mhm.
like 3 chords,
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So
maybe.
you're also a traveling musician. Could you explain to people who might not know what that means, what really a traveling musician is and what they do?
Man. So I guess those are a couple stories for that unto themselves. I'd say the first time I was a traveling musician was when I just left my hometown. I'm from a small town in southeast Kansas, Parsons.
Mhm.
Very small town, like 10,000 people maybe. I ended up making my way to Austin, Texas. And I stayed there for a summer and I got my first gig as a house musician
Mhm.
at Potbelly, right across from the University of Texas,
Oh
like right
wow.
there on the drag.
Mhm.
And I ended up traveling around. I went back to Central Texas after that summer, and then I ended up moving back to Austin.
Mhm.
I played on Sixth Street for a while, and I just bounced around, and that was like the real start of my career there. And then eventually, I ended up coming back home and staying for like a year or so. And then I met this guy who became my manager, and his name was Aaron Keith Stewart, and he was in this three-time Grammy award-winning band called the Sounds of Blackness,
Oh.
and they were like a black gospel R&B band, and he just connected me with people out in Los Angeles. And then eventually I got this marketing job, right?
Mhm.
So I was getting paid to travel to city.
Yep.
So I found something on the side, and then while I was in these cities I was like, knock knock, hey, I'm a musician,
Mhm.
you guys need someone to perform here?
Mhm.
So that's how I ended up getting my foot in the door, and I was playing in San Diego on the rooftops, like of downtown, like Andaz, and this like Russian Armenian restaurant, and like just a bunch of other local places around
Yeah.
there. And then a lot of my performances were on the streets busking
Wow.
because I have like a projecting voice,
Mhm.
and I would just play just catchy riffs and
Mhm.
make up stuff like improv, or I'd be singing people songs that people know, and I would be making pretty good money doing that. Man, I'd be making like $150 sometimes
Wow.
on a good night, like 200, or bad day, like
Yeah.
$50. And I was able to really like just eat. And I stayed at a hostel in San Diego for like 6 weeks,
Wow.
you know,
That's
and it just,
I mean, that's really
uh,
living the dream right there. I mean, that's awesome. And a lot of people have, certain reservations about, like performing live. It can be a struggle for a lot of people to sort of convince themselves. Was that ever a struggle for you sort of performing live, or were you always one of those people who were like, I just need to spread my message. I need to spread my music.
I don't think it's like I mean, I think that it gets down to like a basic like energy exchange, where I would be performing for places or for people, or whether it was on the streets or in a venue.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be like 100 people in the crowd, or maybe more, or even just like 10 people. And if that one person out in the crowd is just like, oh man, like they're
Mm-hmm.
just vibing with my music, I'm like focused on that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like vibing with them together, like collectively. And I would just like feed off their energy, and like it would just like make it so fun for me, and like such a spiritually fulfilling thing,
Mm-hmm.
that even if it was just contemporary music and I wasn't doing worship, I mean, it was like I just feed off of people's love for music and like how that song touches them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say it's like, I don't know, it's just a mutually effective thing, when it
Yeah.
comes to that.
Absolutely. And when you were coming up with lyrics for some of the songs that you wrote, did you like, I mean, a lot of people like to either take their lyrics from, day-to-day stuff or stuff that they personally experience. What would you say is the big influencer in determining your lyrics?
I'd say a lot. It's a culmination of things. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I'll have like something going on, something that inspired me, like a movie or just an event in my life, and then I'll kind of have an idea for a song, and then I'll start writing lyrics, and then I'll come up with a melody, or it's flip flops. Like I said, the
Mhm.
culmination. Sometimes I'm playing a melody, and in my imagination, that melody makes me think of a time and a place and an event, and then it just that melody will like personally strike something up within me. Like for instance, like I wrote a song for my wife, and it was like right before our wedding,
Mhm.
and I just came up with this melody. I was playing this melody. It was called "My Dam Is Broken." It's on Spotify and all that
Mhm.
stuff. But that's the one I wrote for her,
Mhm.
and this melody just like felt like pure love to me, and it inspired me to write a song for her. So then I ended up writing that song "My Dam Is Broken," because it just they really flowed together. Like the lyrics just naturally came out. I started kind of just singing a melody, And as I was singing this, it was like I was really experiencing like pure love while humming this melody to this sound, because that sound came from within me. And the reason why it came from within me is because I felt so inspired by her love.
Mhm.
And their lyrics just fell out of me, and just I wrote that song in a very short amount of time, and I actually finished the song. I got the second verse to it like completely finished when we were just sitting on our bed. I was playing the first part, and then the second part, I mean, I was staring into her eyes, singing the song directly to her, just her and I, in our quiet bedroom. And I ended up singing that whole second part. And then I finished playing it, and I was just like, wow. And I was like, started crying, and I was looking at her, and she was crying, and we were just like, I love you so much, you know?
That's
And
that's totally awesome. And now me being sort of the hopeless romantic that I am myself, every time I have a guy who's either married or in a relationship or vice versa, I always love to ask these three questions. So how did you and your wife meet?
well, that's a fun story. I'm sure she'll critique me on this story later, as she's sitting right there.
Yep.
You can hear her laughing. So, um, I was back from. I'll just tell you the backstory first, if
All
that's
right.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
I was back from California. It's when I ended up moving out to California, and I was actually offered a small like record deal with a branch off of Sony, and I told the cat, hey, like I'm gonna take a month and just go home and kind of relax and chill and go fishing and see my grandma and grandpa and just really detox from the city life.
Mm-hmm.
And that month ended up turning into a year. I just was like, man, I just do not want to go back.
Yeah.
I felt so smothered, and I felt so pressured, and I felt so out of my comfortable element, because like there's no humility in the city.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Absolutely.
in Los Angeles or Studio City where I lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I at that 1 year, came to be, and I was like, God, I'm just ready for something different. Like, I know I don't want to go back to Los Angeles. I also don't want to just live here. I think I'm ready for love, man. I'm 20. I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm ready for like something bigger and just beyond myself. So, believe it or not, I made an online profile
Ooh.
because I was brand manager of a company
Uh-huh.
out in Austin, Texas. So I was traveling all the
Mm-hmm.
time to like the local area, like Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and I just didn't have time to just date a girl, and I really wasn't looking for anybody in my hometown. Yeah, I'm good on that. I went to online, and turns out that she worked like 3 jobs
Wow.
and was a mom and was just super busy. But I created this profile, and hers was the first one that showed up to me. And I didn't. It wasn't like you don't like fill out this like character test.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like this is based on compatibility. It was just like you make an online profile, and then it's like go luck, go fishing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I ended up coming across her profile, and I was like, whoa, this woman is just like me. She wrote a novel
Wow.
of and about me, and she was just like, uh, you know, if you're not digging what I'm putting down, like don't even waste my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I am digging what you're putting down. So I'm gonna try to not waste your time. So I went to go send her a message. It was like, you got to pay for this. You got to sign up. I was like, all right, deal. So I sent her a message, pretty good lengthy message, and then 3 days go by, and I was like, what a waste of money and time.
Mm-hmm.
Deleted the app. I was like, she's probably already taken because she's beautiful and very very intelligent and clearly has a good head on her shoulders. She was a naturalist. I'm a naturalist. So I was like, we already got that in common. She liked to travel. So I was like, well, that sucks. She's clearly taken. So I deleted that app, and then I get an email like 2 or 3 days later, and it was like, C Danger 89 messaged you back. I was like, what? So I reinstalled the app, and I read it. It was just another novel, of course, because that's what she was about. She was clearly a novelist. So I read this message, and at the end of it, it was just like, can I call you? I was like, you're bold.
Oh.
Like, can I call you? So she called me. We spoke for like 5 hours on the phone.
Mhm.
Crazy. Like,
Wow.
just getting it all out there, finding out how we had so much in common. And then we ended up not really talking for like a week or two after like a good week of talking.
Mhm.
Because I was really afraid of the fact that she had a child. I was like, here I am, this wandering vagabond,
Mhm.
like a backpacked before. I've just been all over the country and the with my travels and music. And the last thing I wanted to do is just like come in and like get attached to this kid and then like it not work out. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
was really afraid in that area. So we didn't talk for a few weeks, and then she ended up calling me again, and then we just never stopped talking. And I was like, you know what? Like you're too awesome, and I really enjoy your interest. So we just kept talking, and then eventually, as that brand manager for that CBD honey company,
Mhm.
she I was working at a music festival vending in Arkansas. It's called Solar Flux, like a Flux
Mhm.
festivals, and she ended up driving all the way down to Arkansas from
Wow.
Illinois and met me in person, and we spent that whole week together and just fell madly in love with each other, man. Like,
Yeah.
I knew that she was the one,
That's
and I ended up asking her to marry me actually within that first week.
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, but best thing I've ever done in my life, like the wisest decision I've ever made, because we'll be married for 2 years, like
Mhm.
in August of 2019,
Mhm.
and it's it's good, man. Like we're
That's
still happy, and
That's so awesome. And you answered all my other two questions because my other two questions would be where would you guys go for your first date and then how'd you propose? So you answered all of that in the same question. So you really killed three birds with one stone on that one. So
gotta kill two birds with one stone.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so now going back to your music, at what point, I mean, it says, I mean, you turned into a Christian family man. At what point did that transformation take place? When did you really just say, like, hey, I need to really make a change?
Man, oh, that's a tough one. I mean, we decided we were going to go to church together at some point in our marriage, and we went, and we just kind of slipped through the cracks in this church, and we ended up not going for a while, and we ended up moving to Watsika, Illinois, last winter, and then we were just kind of just arguing over stupid stuff and just petty, like just kind of like hitting that wall, and then she was like, come on, get out of bed, you're going to church. I was like, yes, ma'am, kind of thing,
Mhm.
you know. So I went to church, and the Holy Spirit was just so strong there, and just kind of slammed us both. And we were immediately greeted and welcomed by the pastor of the church when we walked in, and his family. And they didn't let us fall through the cracks. They just loved us and supported us and helped us get back into our walk. And then we ended up going and traveling that summer. And as a family, we all traveled, all three of us. And we stayed at a farm, like a local family farm, and helped them, get like their feet underneath them because they were overwhelmed. They wanted to liquidate all of their assets, but they ended up not doing that when we came, and we just really helped them a lot. And they kind of helped us get involved in the church, and we ended up leaving there and going up to Lake Villa, and somehow we ended up in Pontiac, Illinois. And uh, our first weekend here, we went to a coffee shop, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm a musician. You guys ever need music here? Like, hit me up." And then the guy at the counter was like, dude, I'm a musician too, you know, and I'm involved in this church here in town, Pontiac Bible Church, and we have Praise in the Park this weekend. And it's like this pavilion in the park. They just like pack it full, and everybody just like cook hot dogs, and everybody gets together and like worships together. And
Mhm.
it was just really cool. And like we walked in there, and we hadn't been to a church in a while that we like felt the Holy Spirit at, since Watsika.
Mhm.
And we both were just like looking at each other like, whoa, this is this is a good place. This is really heavy.
Mhm.
I really feel the Holy Spirit here. And we never stopped going. And then I think it was probably like a few weeks ago, my wife came back from church. I woke up sick that morning, and I was supposed to be on the worship team that morning. And it would have been my first time on the worship team.
Mhm.
So I didn't make it into church. And then she went to church. So she got the message from the pastor, and I stayed at home, and we were listening to Luke, right? Like Luke 9 through 15.
Mhm.
And I was listening to it through on my audio Bible, and she came back and she was like, "Pastor spoke about Luke, 10," and I was like, "I just got done listening to that,"
Mhm.
and we just like she just kept feeding me this message, and then we both were just moved to tears because we realized that we're called into the mission field, like to actually go and be missionaries,
Mhm.
and not overseas, but like right here in the U.S., like to those broken families. So like what was prophesied over me when I was younger is now like developing into something, and God's been really helping us grow like biblically and spiritually and like in our communication together, and just putting people in our path that really want to like help mentor us and help us grow there, and like to really just get out of our comfort zone, like to go sit with the elderly in the nursing homes and read the Bible with them,
Mhm.
or to play music for them, or you know what I mean, just to outreach to people and just not be what do you call it, like the sit and listen Christian, or what is it? Yeah, saved to be sat.
Yep.
Yeah, we weren't saved to be sat down.
Mm.
So we've been really feeling called to just have action behind our beliefs, and it's like all because of God. Like God's
Mhm.
just really opened that door for us and slammed us hard with like not just conviction, but um like a foundation that gives us hope.
Absolutely. And how has your music style sort of changed? Because like you said, playing contemporary Christian music or just playing Christian music in general, it's so much more, I'd say, like soft paced. It's not nearly, as fast paced as some musical styles have been. Has that been an adjustment for you, sort of learning to play that style of music?
No, not at all. I've always just kind of been a poet and like a storyteller, and musically, like with instruments and melodies and stuff, like with my guitar, I've always been able to just let music flow out of me. And now that I feel like I have like a more of like a spiritual purpose behind it, I think it's just coming more naturally to me,
Mhm.
and it doesn't feel overwhelming or difficult or um like any different at all, really. Like I've got a few songs I'm writing right now. I've got the melodies down. I even have some lyrics for one of them, and one of them is really just self destruction. Like like the lyrics say, um, "How do I balance God and destruction of myself? Because I know that fear on all levels is really just the devil throwing blows below the belt. I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I'm somebody else. I've lost sight of you and the things I do. Put my soul upon the shelf." And it just
Yeah.
continues on,
Yeah.
and it's like it's just conveying your experiences into verses that rhyme, and I think that God just moves through that
Hmm.
and just kind of hooks it up.
Absolutely. I mean, he works in mysterious ways, but they always seem to tend to work out. And one of the things I always like to ask is, religion has been taking, a downhill turn, I think, especially with like social media and just this current generation. They don't attend church as much as the other generations. They're not really as invested into it as other ones. What are some ways that you think could help in order to get those kids back, sort of back into church, like what their parents and grandparents did?
Man, you know what? Like we were just talking about that the other day. I was saying how the older generation, our grandparents, 85% of them were Christians and
Mm-hmm.
15% were not. And now it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
With our generation, like you and me, 15 out of 100 of us are only Christians.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And given that there is a lot of it, a lot, like you said, social media and all that, I mean, you could reach out to people through social media, but I think the other way around, like people are so distracted with their faces and their phones. In fact, after I'm done helping my buddy
Mm-hmm.
um, get to San Diego, because I started a fundraiser for him because he's homeless. I felt like God called me to do that. Once I help him get to San Diego, I'm going to go downgrade to a flip phone.
Mm-hmm.
And if I need to use the internet, I'm going to go to the library
Mm-hmm.
and just hop on the computer like, we did when we were young before cell phones were able to pull up Facebook and all this
Mm-hmm.
junk. But I think one thing that I really want to do is just genuinely go out and interact with the community. People are so apathetic to face-to-face interactions with people that they don't know. Everybody's so focused on like my job, my life, my car, my house.
Mm-hmm.
They're not worried about their neighbor down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day when we were kids, like when you moved into a neighborhood,
People
"Where are the
greeted you.
Johns?
Yep.
Here's a
Mm-hmm.
pie. Here's a pie. Welcome to the neighborhood."
Mm-hmm.
People don't do it anymore, and I think that getting back to those basic principles of community and neighborhoods, and I always say, like we're like the United States is made up of cities that are made up of counties that are made up of towns that are made up of neighborhoods. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you break it down to that simple, neighborhood level, if everybody had a community garden, can you imagine?
Mhm.
If just trading vegetables, like, why not with our faith? Why can't we be that way? Like, will we just literally go and talk to our neighbors? Like
Mhm.
the other day, like our neighbor jumped our car. Like our car had been having battery problems, and the car kept dying, and we were like, we can't afford to go buy $170 battery, and
Mhm.
we our car was just dead, and I pushed it out of the garage, and it was like 21 degrees outside, and
Mhm.
this elderly lady, when I say elderly, she's probably like in her 60s or so, but she got out of her car, pulled right into her driveway as I'm pushing my car up to the front of my driveway. I'm like, "Hey neighbor, can you help me jump my car?" And she's in her pajamas, and she's like,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, sure, really." And she came and jumped our car, and we ended up going and looking into a new battery,
Mhm.
and sure enough, it was $170. This guy at the store is like, "Yeah, we've got these used ones on the back shelf, and they're $42. You know, how's that sound? Is that better?" And we're like, "Yeah." Puts it in our car, doesn't start, won't work. They tried to charge the battery and jump the battery, did not start. So he's like, "You know what? I'm just going to give you guys a new battery."
Wow,
So we got $170 battery for like $42,
that's awesome.
and we know that it's just because of the fact that it would have stayed inside, but we went and we talked with our neighbor,
Mhm.
and that's a God thing, dude, 100%. So we wanted to go and like thank her earlier and just be
Mhm.
like, "Thank you so much because of your kindness and your graciousness." And whether like God told you to do that, like we don't know, but it's like it's divine for sure. And like that's when like I sit here and say, all the glory goes to God, man, because
Mhm.
like that was seriously divine God thing because we did not have the money for that. And
Mhm.
we weren't anticipating if she wouldn't have pulled up like that, we might have just been like, maybe we just need to stay home.
Yeah. That's a
But
that is so awesome. And again, like I found that out too 100% with my podcast, just like talking to people. I mean, a lot of people miss that face to face communication that we don't have anymore. That's very, very rare. So, I mean, just like doing this, it's so fulfilling just to be able to talk to people and not have to, be looking at a screen. Well, we are looking at a screen, but not have to like be looking
yeah,
at our phones constantly and just coming up with text. It's such a relief. And also when it comes to your style of music though, do you ever bring over similar themes from songs that you'd written previously before you became into the Christian music scene? Do you ever are there some of them transferable, or have you just taken on a whole new different like genre really?
man, honestly, I feel like I've always kind of had my own sound. I don't
Mm,
mean to like toot my own horn or anything like that because obviously I have musical influences and stuff, but I feel like my voice and my songwriting and just everything like that, I feel like kind of has its own unique genre
mhm,
in a sense. It's still acoustic and whatnot, but it's never really been classified. I've never really listened to any other artist that sounds just like
mhm,
me. And like I said, I don't say that in like a vanity sense. Like I just genuinely have not. And if
mhm.
someone has, I would love for them to be like, "You sound exactly like this guy," and I'd be
Yeah.
like, "Sweet, someone I can listen to for months."
Yeah, absolutely.
But I have like a song that I wrote when I was 20 years old. I really was just falling in love with God again, and I uh, I was writing a lot of worship music in that time period, and I actually wrote a song that was like a worship song, and I ended up bleeding that into like contemporary.
Mhm,
Kind of turned back from the contemporary, or I turned back from the Christian side, and I went to solely contemporary.
mhm.
And I ended up using like that best verse from that Christian song in one of my love songs.
Yeah.
And I've actually thought about kind of like just stripping down that and just getting it back to the
Yeah.
worship, and being like, no, like, I should have kept it that way and stayed true to that. But I didn't, and that's fine because, God has his purpose and divine
Mhm.
purpose for my life and my music. So, but I have really thought about taking that verse and just being like, no, no, you need to come back over here. I'm going to
Yeah.
use you here instead. So yeah, I'd
Absolutely.
say that's something that's happened a little bit.
Absolutely. So now we go to our audience favorite part, my personal favorite part of the podcast, a little five questionnaire where I'm going to ask Travis here about five questions and see how he stacks up to all the other musical guests that we've had on the show. So now for our first question, out of all the songs that have ever been written in the history of music, what is one song that you personally wish you would come up with yourself?
Oh, one song that like I've listened to that was written
Hmm.
that I wish I could just like be like, oh yeah, I wrote that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is such a tough, tough song, like a song choice to narrow down because like some of the music that I hear, I'm like, man, I'm in love with that
Mhm.
melody. Some songs, I'm just like, I'm in love. with those lyrics, like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to like really break it down and think like what is the best song that I've really heard before.
Mhm.
And that's tough to do because I love music and
Mhm.
there's so many different genres and so many different types of music that are out there that I would struggle to do that in particularly, but some songs that I mean, because I like chorus music. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm a choir nerd.
Yep.
I'd say one of the songs that I really wish that I like kind of written by myself was like if it was contemporary, I'll throw it into two categories. If it
Okay.
was contemporary, I'd say definitely the Beatles.
Mhm.
Uh, Blackbird's probably one of my favorite
Oh,
songs
yep.
by them, and I just love just how simple it is and how
Mhm.
just simple and catchy and um, just the melody, like and the structures of your fingers on the guitar. It's like it just doesn't make sense how beautifully perfect it is and simple it is because it's like so difficult to play and sing at the same time. But
Mhm.
Beatles has a way of taking that really uh, complex. It's like simply complex. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Because it's so complex to the mind, but when you break it down, it's actually just really simple.
Mhm.
It kind of reminds me of that Gautier song, somebody that I used to know,
Yep.
like boop 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 boop.
Mhm.
It's just like,
Yeah.
that's not hard at all, but dang, it just
Mhm.
so catchy. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And then as far as like a worship song goes, and like the Jesus side of it, I'd say there's like that song "Reckless Love" by Corey Asbury.
Oh, yep.
I'd say that song has like such a heavy anointing on it,
Mhm.
and it's just really really impacted my life. You know,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
that's a great
it's,
choice.
it's a good song, and I
Mhm.
just really love like his vocals on it, like the lyrics. It's just so good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a-
So now for our second question, out of all the artists or musicians that have ever lived, dead or alive, doesn't matter, you can pick either or. What was one artist that you would die to perform with on live, or that one artist that you would prefer to perform live with if you had the opportunity to?
mm. Wow, another tough one, man. Hmm. If I was to jam with like one musician, I'd probably say John Lennon
Mm-hmm.
because of all the Beatles that really like there were four of them quite clearly, but
Mm-hmm.
like the ones that had like the best mission. I really love John Lennon and how he was like he just really stood up for what was right, and I love his voice and all the different songs that he's written. And even when he separated from the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
like he had a lot of really good music, and I would like to jam with him just because I dig his style,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
and he's a good musician.
Oh yeah, 100%. So now, out of all the venues on the planet, if you could perform at any venue, where would it be?
Like to genuinely just perform at any venue, I'd
Mm-hmm.
say whichever venue saves the most souls
Mm-hmm.
and God uses me for. I've you know I could have answered that much more selfishly back before God like
Mm-hmm.
really changed my heart. At this point, wherever the broken are needing to hear something that could.
Well, let's play devil. I'll play devil's advocate. What if God told you you can perform at any venue that you personally want to play at? What would you do?
Mm, man, that's a tough one. I'm not even 100% sure on what would be the biggest and best.
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably over in London,
Mm-hmm.
like where Coldplay performed at in that stadium where they recorded a
Wembley.
fixture. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That is
yeah.
yeah, that actually yeah, that's like the third time we've heard that. Our most popular has been Red Rocks, and then we get like Madison Square Garden is another huge one that we get. But yeah, Wembley is definitely up there. So now we get to the real nitty-gritty. What is a guilty pleasure song that you enjoy?
Oh, like a song that's just nasty.
That you would never want to admit in public that you like, yeah.
Oh, a song that I just really wouldn't like. Oh man, that's so tough. Oh, what is the song? because I'm so picky with music, dude. Like I like what I listen to. I my wife can tell you, I obsess over music. Like when I hear a song I like, I'll put it on repeat and I'll
Hmm.
listen to it over and over again. If I find an album that I like, well, I'm listening to that for the next month
Hmm.
and just don't listen to anything else. So I wouldn't really say that I have any songs that are just like kind of cheesy or you know what I mean, like poppy. Like I can't stand a lot of really poppy songs. Like I mainstream music just grosses me out to be
Hmm.
honest. So
Yeah.
like there's not a single song I could think of that would be kind of like embarrassing for me to admit
Hmm.
that I enjoy because most likely I don't enjoy it just like
Hmm.
everybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I
Like
mean, for me, like Taylor Swift, some of her songs are decent, so that's probably my answer to that. But yeah, I totally understand. Like mainstream has gone
Safe and Sound by
really
Taylor
downhill.
Swift.
Yeah.
That's the one that was off of the Hunger Games, Safe and
Hmm.
Sound.
Yeah.
That's not like one of her cheesy poppy songs.
Hmm.
Like that's a really like intimate song,
Hmm.
and I found a lot of joy and beauty in that song, like
Yeah.
"Safe and Sound" by Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
I thought that that was really, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is definitely a great one. So now, if you had never decided to become a musician, if you had never really, said that like, oh, that's a career I don't want, where do you think you would be at right now? What do you think you'd be doing?
I think that I would either be like a farmer.
Hmm.
To be honest, I genuinely think that I would be out in the sticks, living on a ranch, farming the lands, and bringing food to people.
Hmm.
Like that's, I really fell in love with gardening when I was like 21, I think,
Hmm.
and I started to research that more and read more about that and watch videos on it. And I even went to alison.com. It's like a free educational
Hmm.
website, and I watched their videos on how to become a gardener and like a master gardener. And I really find a lot of passion in just working with the earth and the soil and watching plants grow and grow each day. It blows my mind when you watch like a new sprout come
Absolutely.
out of a plant. And the next thing you know, it's like this big, like a week later,
Hmm.
you're just like, oh, you know,
I love those videos of people like who have cameras that like document it over time, like it's slowly going up and up, and then they like speed it up so it's like a
yeah,
movie. That is the best. I mean, I absolutely love that. It's so cool to see. And then, yeah, farming for me too. That was another thing that I was interested in getting in. I mean, I'm from a big city, but we visited. My dad was born in a town of 200 people, so I mean, we'd visit there all the time, and that was just a huge farming town. So that, I mean, it's really, and it's such a respectable profession that most people don't talk about
yeah,
nowadays, which is it's really really underrated. But now you talked about doing a lot of work in the U.S. Are there any areas in particular that you would really like to go for mission work that you really think need a lot of help?
man. You mean like over in like another country?
Oh no, places in the U.S. because you said that you're going to be focusing a lot in the
Oh,
U.S.
yeah. Honestly, I I haven't totally like just picked a single place in particular. Like the way I look at it is there's a lot of cities all
Mm-hmm.
across the U.S. Like even if, I'm not even talking like the crime rate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the poverty rate.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of people are poverty stricken, and a lot of it is they also don't know how to be self sufficient. So I actually want to be able to incorporate like raised bed gardening and
Mm-hmm.
teaching people to actually come together and work together, and like you can find common ground through gardening. And then in that area, you can also talk about God, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not just like let me teach you how to be self sufficient, but let me also teach you about how God can change your life and like change how you look at the world and how you look at your community and how you know, I mean, like how you view yourself. 'Cause a lot of us are just broken people,
Mm-hmm.
and God can take those broken things and turn them into really beautiful things. And
Mhm. Are there
I
some
just
ways
think
that
that
are there some ways
crazy.
that like you really plan on because like I mean no offense at all, but sometimes when people like bring up God that automatically turns off a certain amount of people where they're just like, "Oh no, screw this, like I'm out of it." Are there some ways that you
Yeah,
plan on making it so that like you don't automatically just like make it so that like half the people that you're working with are just like, "Oh, he mentioned God, like I'm out of here." Are there some ways where you just like want to get down to the more human aspect too before you bring up, serving the Lord?
yeah. You know what's really cool is like my wife and I were kind of debating about that last night.
Mhm.
We were reading this Francis Chan book called "You and Me Forever,"
Mhm.
and Francis Chan is a really, really, really awesome, minister. And we were talking about how we were going to go over and thank our neighbor, and because like obviously in the Bible you're supposed to make disciples. You're supposed to go out and talk about Jesus, and I was like, well, we need to go over there and do that. Like we need to get in there and be like, Jesus, have you heard about it? Blah, blah, blah. And she was like, well, let's just go over and just literally talk with her on a human level and just express our gratitude. And if the opportunity presents itself, then you make it known. You know what I mean? Like, don't just go over there like the J Dubs, like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Hey,
Yep.
we're literally here to talk to you about one thing and one thing only. Let me
Mm-hmm.
just shut down your throat. We want to just be able to be human beings and just kind of be transparent about the fact that, like, we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm just a broken dude that copes with a lot of darkness every single day. But without God, I wouldn't be able to do that. And it's like, let me just kind of just show you, like, my random act of kindness that God called me to do, plant seeds. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to literally kick their door in and beat them up with a Bible and be
Mm-hmm.
like, there you go, now you're saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's our plan. Like, we want to get a school bus and convert it into a tiny home on wheels.
Wow.
And then we'll have our home with us and we can just travel all over the US. And, you don't have to pay rent when you live in your bus. So
That is awesome. That is such a great idea. And now, where would you like to see yourself in a year from now? What is the goal?
I would like to just be where, like, with what I just talked about. Like, I would
Mm-hmm.
genuinely like to be on our school bus, traveling across the U.S. or just to small local areas that need help, and just lending a hand where we feel like God called us to be.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's volunteering at a farm, whether it's helping, create like community gardens in small towns that are really just struggling, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't know. Like, God has got such a big plan, and uh, we don't know all the answers, but we feel like God's going to put people on our path that
Mm-hmm.
we need to meet. Are going to help us get there, and God's going to help us make the right decisions as long as we're open to it and, like, willing to receive His word.
Absolutely. And are there any places where, I mean, like you said, some of your songs are on Spotify, other places are your song, or is a lot of your music
Yeah.
on there? Where could people find your music?
Spotify,
Mm-hmm.
probably the best place. I've got like 8 songs on the internet right now. I released 2 EPs, one back in 2016 that I was not pleased with the quality at all. Like, I had this guy I was friends with, and he ended up charging me like $400,
Wow.
and he did not even like remotely balance my music to the point where it would like sound good. Like, I needed
Mm-hmm.
to get it mastered, but even without it being mastered, it's just like there's so many flaws there
Mm-hmm.
that I just so critical, and I just wasn't too proud of it. But then I had my 2018 EP, Prelude. I recorded that with my buddy Brad Yeoman out in Lombard,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a really good dude,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just a great friend, and he did a really good job, and he worked really hard on my music, just a studio bedroom, like bedroom studio thing. And I'm proud of that work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that work is something that I put out, and I'm just like, if you're gonna listen to my music, like, go check out Prelude, because that's 4 songs. I have a lot more songs than that. I could come out with another few EPs or even like a small CD.
Mm-hmm.
But like, he helped me get that to the point where I was like, okay, I like that. Like, I could listen to my own music and enjoy it. So I'd say Prelude on Spotify or iTunes or Tidal or Deezer or wherever, like that. That's the music that I would send people to, or even my website, travisfrenchmusic.com.
All right.
If you went there and then did the /music,
Mm-hmm.
like, that EP is for free up on my website. Like,
Awesome.
just listen to
Yeah.
it, check it out.
Absolutely. I'll leave links down below for all of that. And again, most people would be wondering, like, how did we get in contact? Wesley, one of our earlier podcast guests, if everyone can remember back then, got us in contact. How did you get in touch with Wesley? How did that relationship form?
Oh, like, how did I get into contact with them?
Yeah.
I just performed at that Q bar where I met Wesley at,
Yeah.
and he approached me there, and he was just like, dude, really like your music. I just want to talk with you and to see how I can help you. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you need? Like, I want to just help you with your music. So he wanted to, like, help me get like merch and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, and like social media exposure and just all that stuff. But like I kind of mentioned before, when I felt like after the Los Angeles thing, like when I was living in Studio City, I feel like I just really got pulled away from that scene for a good reason. I just, like, I was doing well. I could have had success in my career musically living out there, but I would not have been happy.
Mm-hmm.
And my opinion, fame or happiness, I'm definitely going to choose happiness all
Mhm.
day. And that's the best decision I've ever made, was leaving that life behind, because I met a lot of people who were really just all about the self gratification and self glorification, and like the, I know this person, and oh, I can get you with this person. And it was never like, hey, what are your beliefs? Like, hey, how are you doing on a personal level? Like, they didn't, if you start like a deep conversation with, I'd say like 80% of the people that I met out there,
Mhm.
they would just be like really turned off by that.
Mhm.
And like, they would think that you're like weird.
Mhm.
And it's like, I'm just a human being, man. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm anything other than that.
Yeah.
And I mean, probably, I'm just a small town Kansas guy. So,
Mhm. Absolutely. So before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
yeah, you.
All right.
And thanks for having me on, my man. And
Absolutely.
of course, my parents, and most importantly, I'm already going to give glory to God for
Mhm.
that He's been doing for me.
Amen. All right.
And just like my church, PBC, Pontiac Bible Church in Pontiac, like, man, all the leaders there, like Jared and Josh and Pastor Nick, like, it's really, really great guys, man. And
Mhm.
they've been so good to me and my family, and just, my wife, of course, she's really, really amazing woman, and I love her to death.
That's
So,
awesome. So again, you guys go check out Travis. I'll leave all the links below for his stuff. I really, really recommend it. And keep doing what you're doing. I mean, keep spreading the message of God. We really, really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.